My name is Beatrice McMahon. I'm 29 years old, and 3 months ago, my boyfriend humiliated me in front of his entire family, then acted like I was the problem for not laughing it off. But the truth is, that dinner didn't end our relationship. It just ripped off the last layer of denial I'd been clinging to. Because what happened at that table wasn't a random cruel joke. It was the final sentence in a paragraph he'd been writing for months. One tiny correction at a time, one suggestion at a time, one subtle little reminder that he believed I should be grateful he picked me. At the time, I worked as an operations coordinator for a logistics company in Pennsylvania. Not glamorous, not something that makes strangers go, wow, but it paid the bills and then some. I lived alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood. I drove a 2019 Honda Accord I maintained like it was a sacred ritual. Oil changes on schedule, tires rotated, no weird dashboard lights ignored just because I didn't want to deal with them. My life wasn't flashy, it was built, and I was proud of that. My apartment wasn't luxury, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture earned slowly over time like a collection of proof that I could stand on my own. I'd graduated from the cheap, wobbly particle board stuff and invested in real adult furniture. A leather couch I found on sale after stalking the price for weeks. A dining table that seated 6, even though most nights it was just me, because I liked the idea of people around it someday. I even bought quality kitchen knives because cooking with dull blades makes you hate your own existence. Everything had a place. Everything made sense. I kept a budget spreadsheet. I liked routines. I liked knowing what the next week looked like. Some people call that boring. I call it peace. I'd been single for about 8 months before I met Jason Miller. The relationship before him ended because I was too predictable, too structured. Apparently, my idea of a good weekend, gym, groceries, a woodworking project, maybe dinner with friends, didn't match the kind of chaos my ex thought was exciting. So after that breakup, I focused on myself. I hit the gym regularly. I picked up woodworking, which was partly therapy and partly a way to prove I could make something solid with my own hands. I learned how to exist without drama. And honestly, I started to like myself more than I had in years. Then, last September, my coworker Brandon invited me to his birthday party. It was one of those loud gatherings where the music is too high, the wine is too cheap, and people talk in circles because they can't hear each other. I almost didn't go, but I did, and that's where I met Jason. He was visiting from Pittsburgh, a friend of Brandon's girlfriend, some college connection. Jason had this artsy, effortless vibe that made it feel like he lived in a different universe than me. Vintage band shirt, hair that looked like it was messy on purpose, the kind of smile that made you think he'd never had to fight for attention in a room. We ended up talking by the snack table, bonding over the terrible wine and those suspicious little cheese cubes that always taste like plastic. It started as jokes. Then it turned into actual conversation. He asked about my job, and instead of pretending to understand, he asked follow-up questions. I told him about woodworking, expecting the usual polite nod, but he leaned in like it mattered. When I admitted I was obsessive about budgeting, he didn't laugh. He said, "That's kind of hot, actually. Like you have your life together." That line should have made me suspicious. Instead, it made me feel seen. We exchanged numbers and texted that same night. No weird 3-day waiting game. No pretending not to care. Coffee dates turned into dinners. Dinners turned into weekend trips. Jason loved antique shops. Like hunting through other people's discarded lives made him feel inspired. He'd hold up something random, a chipped mirror, a weird lamp, a cracked vinyl sleeve, and talk about it like it was treasure. Being with him felt easy at first. He said he was tired of women who couldn't commit to anything beyond the next hour. He called me his stable rock, his anchor. I took it as a compliment because so many people use stable like it was an insult. After 3 months of driving back and forth, because Pittsburgh was about 45 minutes away, Jason suggested I meet his parents. His father, Richard, owned a small accounting firm. His mother, Patricia, was a nurse practitioner. He had an older brother, Kevin, who worked in finance and explained it so poorly I wasn't convinced he even knew what he did. His younger sister, Danielle, was away at college studying environmental science. Meeting the parents felt like a milestone. I prepared like it was a job interview. I brought flowers for Patricia. I asked Jason what his dad liked, and he mentioned a vintage Mustang Richard was restoring. So I read up on Mustangs, just enough to sound like I cared, without sounding like I was trying too hard. Dinner went well. Patricia adored the flowers. Richard warmed up the moment I asked about the Mustang. We spent almost an hour in the garage looking at it, and I realized he was the type of man who documented everything. He had a 3-ring binder of restoration decisions, like the car was a legal case. Kevin barely spoke, just scrolled his phone and smirked at random moments. Patricia kept apologizing for him, saying he was stressed. Danielle wasn't there, but everyone mentioned her like she was the family's bright light. Before we left, Patricia hugged me and said I should come back any time. Richard shook my hand and said, "You're good people." On the drive home, Jason kept talking about how shocking that was, how his family never liked anyone he dated, how Kevin always found something to criticize, how his dad was usually cold. "And you just won them over," he said, like I'd passed a test I didn't know I was taking. After that dinner, my apartment became our default. Jason said my place was better. Better coffee maker, better kitchen setup, better everything. I had more space, I had organization, I had quiet, I had stability. And he liked that, until he started trying to improve it. At first it was small comments, harmless. "Why do you fold towels like that? It takes up so much space." "Do you really need to vacuum twice a week?" "You could fit more stuff in here if you got rid of some of this furniture." I answered calmly. I explained my logic. Towels folded that way kept the closet neat. Vacuuming helped my allergies. I liked open space because clutter made my brain itch. Jason would smile and say, "Okay." But his eyes said something else. They said, "You're cute when you think you're right." Around month 7, the comments sharpened. "You could just meal prep everything instead of cooking every night." "Why are you still balancing your budget like it's 2005? "You're spending Saturday organizing your toolbox." "Beatrice, just leave it." It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was critique, disguised as concern, like he was optimizing me, like I was a system that needed debugging. And then his antique shop finds started accumulating in my apartment. A vintage lamp that didn't match anything. An Art Deco mirror he swore would elevate the vibe. Random plates displayed on my bookshelf like my books were decoration, not things I actually used. When I suggested we talk about where things would go before he just placed them, he got defensive. "I thought you wanted me to feel comfortable here," he said, like I'd accused him of committing a crime. "I thought we were building a life together." That sentence, "building a life together," should have sounded romantic. Instead, it landed heavy in my chest. Because somewhere along the line, Jason stopped visiting my home and started acting like it belonged to him too. And I didn't realize it yet, but the ground under my feet was already shifting, quietly, steadily, toward a moment that would finally force me to choose myself. If I'm honest, the change didn't happen all at once. That's the part people don't understand when you tell stories like this later. They ask why you didn't leave sooner, why you didn't see it, why you didn't put your foot down. But control almost never kicks the door in. It slips through the cracks while you're busy convincing yourself you're being reasonable. After that first family dinner, Jason started spending most weekends at my place. Then some weekdays. Then most nights. At first he'd ask, "Mind if I come over tonight? Is it okay if I work from your dining table tomorrow?" Then he stopped asking. "I'll be there around 7. I'm already on my way. I grabbed groceries. We'll cook at your place." Somehow, my apartment became the default without us ever naming it that. He had a key by then, which made sense at the time. We were together. We trusted each other. Or at least, I thought we did. I'd come home from work and Jason would already be there, headphones on, laptop open, my dining table covered in his design books and colored pens. He worked remotely, so my quiet, structured space suited him, at least in theory. But the more time he spent there, the more he started to treat my routines like problems that needed solving. "Why do you always do laundry on Wednesdays?" he asked one night as I folded clothes. "Because it fits my schedule," I said. "But wouldn't it make more sense to wait until the weekend and do it all at once?" That word again, sense. It wasn't curiosity, it was evaluation. He questioned how I stocked my fridge, why I bought fresh vegetables instead of frozen, why I spent extra money on coffee beans instead of buying the cheapest option, why I balance my checkbook manually when everything's digital now. Each comment landed like a tiny pebble, easy to ignore on its own. But together, they started to weigh me down. When I tried to explain myself, Jason would smile, nod, and say, "Okay," in that tone people use when they've already decided you're wrong. His things kept multiplying. A drawer of clothes became half my closet. His toiletries spread across my bathroom counter. That expensive hairdryer he insisted on buying took up more space than my actual necessities. Then came the decor, always decor. Every weekend he brought something new from an antique shop, something he insisted had character, something that just needed the right space. My clean, minimalist apartment slowly turned into a collision of my order and his chaos. I didn't mind compromise, I just wanted a conversation. So one night, after he'd placed yet another random item on my bookshelf without asking, I said carefully, "Hey, can we talk about where things go before we set them up? Just so it still feels like my space, too?" The air shifted instantly. "I thought you wanted me to feel comfortable here," he said, hurt flashing across his face. "I do," I replied. This is still my apartment." "We're together," he shot back. "I thought we were building a life. Why are you being so controlling about furniture?" Controlling. That word stuck with me. I wasn't trying to control him. I was trying to recognize my own home. But the conversation went nowhere. Jason shut down, and I ended up apologizing just to restore peace. I told myself relationships required compromise, that love meant flexibility, that I couldn't expect everything to stay exactly the way I wanted it. By month 8, Jason was effectively living with me, even though we never actually said those words. He stopped asking if he could come over and started announcing it, stopped checking if I had plans, and assumed I was free. And when I mentioned needing a night to myself, his reaction wasn't understanding. "Why do you need alone time?" he asked once, genuinely confused. "Because I'm human," I said. "We're in a relationship. Isn't the point being together?" I tried explaining that healthy relationships included independence, that I needed downtime to recharge, that it wasn't about rejecting him. He took it personally anyway. He'd get quiet, withdrawn, like I'd hurt him by wanting space in my own life. Then his lease in Pittsburgh came up. At first, it was casual, comments sprinkled into conversations like confetti. "What do you think comes next for us?" "It'll be nice not driving back and forth all the time. Your place makes more sense anyway." Heavy implications, no direct question. Finally, one night over dinner, he said it plainly. "So I'm thinking I'll bring my stuff next weekend. We can figure out where everything goes together." Not a question. A statement. I set my fork down. "Don't you think we should talk about that first?" "Talk about what?" he said. "I basically live here already, right?" That sentence made my stomach tighten. "Actually moving in is different," I said carefully. "There are logistics, bills, expectations. We should plan this." Jason sighed like I'd just made things unnecessarily complicated. "Why do you have to turn everything into a business transaction?" he asked. "If you really loved me, this wouldn't be such a big deal." That one hurt. Because I did love him, or at least I loved who I thought he was, and now I was being told that wanting clarity meant I wasn't committed. We argued, again. He accused me of not taking the relationship seriously. I explained that wanting to discuss practical details didn't mean I wasn't invested. He said love shouldn't need spreadsheets and agreements. Eventually we compromised, or at least that's what I told myself. Jason could move in, but we'd sign a formal roommate agreement. Rent split, utilities, responsibilities, clear expectations, so neither of us felt taken advantage of. He agreed, but reluctantly, made jokes about how unromantic it was, how he felt like he was moving in with an accountant, not a girlfriend. Moving day was November 19th. Jason told me he didn't have much stuff, mostly clothes and his desk setup. The U-Haul that pulled up outside my apartment told a very different story. It was packed floor to ceiling. Boxes labeled collectibles, vintage finds, sentimental items. Furniture I'd never seen before. Decorative pieces he'd apparently been storing at his parents' house. His entire life, compressed and ready to spill into mine. His older brother Mark helped unload. He made comments the whole time. "Wow, that's more than you mentioned. Hope you like vintage stuff. Guess your place is about to change." His girlfriend tried to soften it by asking where things should go. Mark just smirked, like he was enjoying the realization dawning on my face. My apartment transformed in a single weekend. My couch, the one I'd saved for and bought on sale, was pushed into the spare bedroom because Jason's was more comfortable and matched his aesthetic better. My coffee table, the first piece of woodworking I'd ever completed, was replaced by a vintage trunk that apparently needed to be the centerpiece. The dining area became his office. My simple setup vanished under dual monitors, drawing tablets, stacks of books, and jars of colored pens. My bedroom, my last untouched space, filled with his clothes, shoes, jewelry stands, and more throw pillows than I knew what to do with. He replaced my blackout curtains with sheer ones that let light flood in at 6 in the morning. change my bedding to something patterned and tassel-covered. By Sunday evening, nothing looked like my home anymore. Jason stood in the living room, hands on his hips, smiling. "This feels more like home now," he said. I smiled back and told myself, again, that this was just what compromise looked like. The roommate agreement sat unsigned on the counter, and somehow, despite everything, I still didn't realize I was already paying the price. December arrived quietly, like it didn't want to draw attention to the fact that everything in my life felt heavier. Bills started coming in: rent, utilities, internet. The same ones I'd always paid, except now they were supposed to be split. I sent Jason a breakdown. Half of everything. Clear, simple, exactly what we'd agreed to in theory. "Yeah, I'll transfer it," he said. He didn't. Days passed. I followed up gently. He acted surprised, like the thought had completely slipped his mind. Then he'd send money, always less than what he owed. "Oh, I thought rent was lower. The electric bill seems high. I bought groceries this week, so I figured that covered part of it." Every conversation turned into a negotiation. I started keeping track because I had to. By early December, he was nearly $12,200 behind. When I showed him the math, his reaction wasn't concern. It was offense. "I didn't realize you were tracking everything so closely," he said, eyes narrowed. "These are bills," I replied. "They don't disappear if we ignore them." "It just feels like you're nickel and diming me instead of being generous." Generous. He wanted generosity while criticizing how I spent money, while buying more vintage junk, while living in my space and quietly letting me subsidize his life. The irony made my head spin. That same week, Jason's family hosted their annual pre-holiday dinner. He'd talked it up for weeks. Big table, extended relatives, traditions. I brought a nice bottle of wine from a local vineyard his mom liked. I dressed carefully. I showed up ready to be polite and pleasant and invisible if necessary. The house was packed when we arrived. Kids running around. Conversations overlapping. Patricia greeted us warmly. Richard waved me over and introduced me to everyone like he was proud I was there. Dinner was a production. Long table, about 25 people, food everywhere. I ended up seated between Jason and some cousin who worked in insurance. Jason's brother Mark sat across from us with his girlfriend. His younger sister Danielle had come home from college and smiled sympathetically when she saw where I was sitting. Everything was normal, until it wasn't. "So, Jason," an aunt called down the table, "how's living together going?" Jason smiled, that tight, rehearsed smile I'd learned to recognize. "It's great," he said. "We're figuring out our rhythm." "That's wonderful," the aunt said. "Must be nice having someone so responsible to lean on." Jason laughed. Not his real laugh, a performative one. "Oh yeah, definitely," he said. "Although sometimes I think Beatrice might be a little too responsible." A few uncomfortable chuckles. Patricia frowned. Danielle glanced at me. "Too responsible?" the aunt asked. "I just mean," Jason continued, warming up now, "everything's so structured, every dollar tracked, every hour planned. Sometimes it feels like I'm living inside a spreadsheet." More laughter, this time sharper. I felt heat crawl up my neck. "But structure's good," Patricia offered quickly. "You balance each other." "I guess," Jason said, shrugging. "Though sometimes I wonder if I lowered my standards a bit to make it work." The table went silent. Forks froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the kids seemed quieter in the next room. I turned slowly to look at him. "What do you mean by that?" I asked. Jason stared at his plate. "I just mean you're stable and reliable, but you're not exactly exciting." Danielle spoke up. "Jason, what the hell?" "I'm being honest," he said. "Everyone talks about how honesty matters in relationships." "There's honesty," Danielle snapped, "and then there's just being cruel." Jason finally looked at me. "You should actually thank me for lowering my standards to date you. Most people wouldn't appreciate what you bring to the table." There it was, fully formed, unfiltered, spoken in front of his entire family. For a moment, I didn't feel anything. Just a strange clarity, like something inside me clicked into place. I set my fork down carefully, wiped my mouth, looked at him. "Thank you," I said. He blinked. "What?" I stood, pushed my chair back slowly. "Thank you for lowering your standards," I said evenly. "That's incredibly generous of you." Patricia gasped. Richard stood halfway up. "Beatrice," Jason started. "Thank you for making this clear," I continued. "I really appreciate the honesty." I picked up my jacket. "Wait," Jason said. "Where are you going?" I turned back. "Home. To the apartment you've been living in rent-free while criticizing everything about me." The room erupted. Richard tried to intervene. Patricia called my name. Danielle was yelling at Jason. I didn't stay. I walked out, got in my car, and drove the 45 minutes home in silence, replaying the last 8 months with brutal clarity. When I walked into my apartment, I barely recognized it. His stuff everywhere, his furniture, his life layered over mine. I sat on the couch, his couch now, and stared at the wall. My phone started buzzing 20 minutes later. Texts, calls, voicemails. I ignored all of it. That night I made a decision. Morning came. Coffee tasted wrong because he'd replaced my brand. My phone kept buzzing. Around 10, it rang again. "Richard, I'm so sorry," he said the moment I answered. "What Jason said was unacceptable. We don't condone that." Something cracked in my chest. "I appreciate that," I said quietly. "You didn't deserve that," he continued, "and I wanted you to hear that from me." Jason still hadn't apologized. That told me everything. Jason didn't apologize that night. Not really. What I got instead were texts that bounced wildly between panic and anger. "I can't believe you embarrassed me like that. You completely overreacted. I was joking. Why are you so sensitive? Can we please talk like adults?" There was a lot of emotion in those messages, just none of it was accountability. I didn't respond. I spent that night sitting in my living room, looking around at a space that no longer felt like mine, mentally separating what belonged to me from what belonged to him. It was the first time in months I'd let myself feel angry without immediately trying to justify it away. The next morning, the coffee tasted wrong because he'd insisted on switching to some expensive organic brand that somehow had less flavor than dirt. My phone was still buzzing. Around 10 a.m., Richard called again. He didn't pressure me, didn't defend his son, just checked in. "Patricia and I talked to Jason," he said carefully. "What he said was cruel. There's no excuse for it." I thanked him, hung up feeling oddly steadier. Jason, meanwhile, still hadn't said the words "I'm sorry" without attaching a condition to them. By Monday evening, there was a knock on my door. I already knew it was him. Jason looked awful. Red eyes, wrinkled clothes, the kind of messy that isn't stylish anymore. I let him in because avoiding the conversation felt worse than having it. "I'm sorry about what I said," he started. I waited. He didn't continue. "I didn't mean it like that," he added. "I was trying to be funny." "Were you?" I asked calmly. He hesitated, and that hesitation answered everything. "I love you," he said quickly, like it could patch the gap. "I don't want to lose you over this." "You told your entire family that you lowered your standards to be with me," I said. "Those are very specific words." He tried to reframe it, talked about his exes, how they were exciting but unreliable, how I was safe, how he chose stability. "And you thought telling me I should be grateful you settled for me was a compliment?" "That's not what I meant." "But it's what you believe," I said. The conversation spiraled. He cried. I stayed calm. He accused me of being too rigid. I pointed out that insulting your partner publicly and then blaming them for being hurt wasn't a great look. Eventually, I said the words that had been forming in my chest since the night before. "I need you to stay somewhere else for a while." He stared at me. "You're kicking me out?" "I'm asking for space." "This is my home too." "It's not," I said gently. "My name is on the lease. You never signed the roommate agreement, and right now, I don't feel safe in my own space." That broke something. More tears, more accusations, more attempts to make me doubt myself. But I was done. The next evening, while Jason was at work, I packed his things, methodically. No anger, just efficiency. Clothes, toiletries, vintage finds, every item placed in boxes and stacked neatly by the door. When he arrived with his brother's truck, he barely spoke. His brother shot me looks. Jason cried. I helped carry boxes anyway. At the door, he paused. "Is this really it?" "You told me how you see me," I said. "I'm just accepting it." They left. I closed the door and exhaled, deep, full, like I'd been holding my breath for months. That was 3 months ago. Since then, life has been quieter, cleaner, mine again. I blocked Jason everywhere after a long email where he accused me of abandoning him and proving his point about me being too rigid. I didn't finish reading it. Richard called a few times to check in. Danielle texted to apologize for her brother and ask if I was okay. We still get coffee sometimes. She's good people. Jason, as far as I know, is dating someone more exciting, living back with his parents. Still the same. And me? I replaced my blackout curtains, put my furniture back, made coffee the way I like it, organized my toolbox on a Saturday without anyone telling me it was a waste of time. I didn't lose a relationship that night at dinner. I got my life back.